Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back again with another book review, and today we are going to be reviewing the newest Stephen King short story collection, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams. So here it is, and here we are, and there's the book. I really do like the illustration on the cover. So I know this has been out a little while, but I just finally got around to reading it and got around to reviewing it. And I've never reviewed a short story collection before, so I figured the best way to do this would be to review it the same way I would review a wrestling pay-per-view. We're going to give you a breakdown and a score of each individual story, and then an overall score of the collection as a whole at the end. So this came out this year. Was it this year? Well, it might have been last year. I don't even know. This book, hardcover, clocks in at 495 pages, and there's a total of 20 different stories collected in this volume. Yeah, I've got notes. I don't usually do notes, but I've got notes because I jotted notes down as I finished each story. Contrary to the title of the book, there were not that many bad dreams inside this collection. It was a bit of a mixed bag for me. As always, Stephen King, he could write a laundry list of turd epithets, and it would be great because he is such a great writer. But this one, it was a bit of a mixed bag, and well, let's get into that. One thing I do like about this book is that at the beginning of each short story, he has a little blurb. He's written a little bit about where the story came from, where he got the idea from, a little insight into the writer's mind, and I do appreciate that. I do like that that's included in this collection. 20 little blurbs at the beginning of 20 little stories. It just gives you a little insight into the machinations that are Stephen King's mind. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First story in the collection is a story called Mile 81. It is a horror novel, and it's a pretty solid old school horror novel about a car at an abandoned rest stop that eats people. It's a lot better when you read it than that explanation. That's just a off the cuff sort of blurb of the story. The ending was a little weird, how they got rid of the cannibal car. But I liked it. I really enjoyed the story. Old school horror, Stephen King just delves right back into the way that he writes things. I'm going to give that one right off the bat. That one's going to get a 4 out of 5. Really good opening to the collection. Next up, we've got a story that he called Premium Harmony. This is not a horror story, and this is where the mixed bag stuff gets into it. A story about a husband and wife on their way to Walmart, stops at a convenience store, and the woman has a heart attack. Boom. There it is. Not sure where King was going with this. I believe he was trying to write a dark comedy. It was neither dark nor comical, in my opinion. I didn't dig it. I read it, and I got, well, there's a couple of 20 pages I've just wasted of my life. So, not really feeling that one. That one wasn't... 2 out of 5 for that one. That gets a low grade for me because I didn't care for that one. Next one was a story called Batman and Robin Have an Altercation. Long title, but not a horror story. But I did like it. It's about a son and his 83-year-old elderly father who has Alzheimer's, and they're involved in a road rage incident. I'm not going to give you the details about it, but it was pretty good. This one did make me laugh. Anytime Stephen King can make me laugh, that's a good thing. It was violent and sweet and sad all at the same time. It was pretty violent for the road rage incident, but then it was neat what the father did, but it was sad because of the father's condition. I really enjoyed that story. 4 out of 5 for Batman and Robin. The next up we got a horror story. Next up we got a story called The Dune. And this is about a man who finds an island that has a sand dune on it, and occasionally there's a name or names written on the dune, and these are names of people who are going to die. Pretty good story. I thought it could have been longer. Kind of felt like a shell. Kind of felt that there should have been more to it. And a lot of the stories in this collection feel like shells, like there should be more to them. But it was just simple, easy to read, good idea. I like the premise behind it. I gave that one a 3 out of 5. Next one up, we've got another horror story called The Bad Little Kid. And Stephen King wanted to write a story about a bad little kid that was the apotheosis of all bad little children. He wanted to write a story that was the be-all, end-all of bad little kids. And he sort of succeeded. It was a pretty good story about a little kid who does some really a supernatural little kid who does some really shitty things. I would have liked to see the little kid be more violent. He wasn't violent enough for my taste. He wasn't disturbing enough for my taste. He needed to be more balls to the wall kind of thing. It was good, but I think it could have been a little bit better if he'd just been more vicious, more violent, and done some more just bad things. But still, I give that a 4 out of 5. Next up, we have a story called A Death. And that's basically a simple story about a murderer's execution in the Old West. Again, a shell. It just felt like a shell, like a snapshot. I'm not really sure where King was going with this one. It just felt like just a character sketch, maybe. It didn't really grab me a whole lot. 2 out of 5 for that one. Next up, we have the first of 2 poems in this book. Yes, Stephen King does write poetry. There it is. First poem, this one was called The Bone Church. I didn't rate it, and I don't rate poetries. And the reason I don't rate poems is because I don't understand poems. I can't write poems. I don't understand poetry. I really don't. There was some good imagery in it, but as far as poetry goes, I couldn't tell you if it was a good poem or a bad poem. It was just a poem. So I don't rate the poems. So 0 out of 0, because, yeah, poems. The next one was a story called Morality, and I like this story. A man and a woman and a dying priest, and basically the idea is how much would it take? How much money would it take, and what would it take for you to toss away your morality and do something real, evil or sinful or whatever? And I like the story. I like the fact that there was this preacher guy that wanted this woman to sin for him, sin by proxy, and then she commits this sin, and then I like watching how this sort of taints her soul, and she sort of devolves, and her marriage blows up, and her social life blows up, and all the ramifications start to happen. I thought it was a really good story. That one, to me, gets a 4 out of 5. Then we got a story called Afterlife. And this is simply Stephen King's attempt to try to figure out what the hell happens to us after we die. It's another, what happens to us after we die, Uncle Steve? There it is. It was short. It was decent. 3 out of 5. I mean, it's just another short romp through the mind of King. Then the next story we got. Okay, now this is where the book really. The next story up is a story called You Are. Now, for you Dark Tower purists out there, this is a Dark Tower story. Dark Tower story. This is about a Kindle that can access all of the levels of the tower. This, 5 out of 5. This is my favorite story of the entire collection because it is a great story. It is a tower story. The low men are in it. We got some Cantori that show up in this story. Excellent story. It was released originally as a Kindle single, which I did buy years ago, so I have read it before. Just love this story. And for those of you that want to read the extra tower material, boom, there it is. There's 5 out of 5. Just a great, great story. Next one is a story called Herman Wouk is Still Alive. You want the long and skinny of that? What did I write down? 2 fat women with 7 kids between them commit vehicular suicide while driving their car into a tree. Yeah, that's the story. That's the story. Whatevs. That's a 2 out of 5. People might like this as maybe it's a look at American life or American culture or American values. I don't know. I read it and I went, heh. So, whatevs. That one's just that is what it is. Next up, we got another horror story called Under the Weather. This was a good one. This one was about a man who his wife has died, but he refuses to believe that she's dead. He just tells everybody that she's under the weather, and she stays in the house for like a week as she rots. Yeah. I really like this story. This one gets a 4 out of 5 for me. Would have got a 5 out of 5 if it was longer. But it was a really good story. It's one of those stories where you just sort of devolve as you read it, and then you get to the end and you realize, oh, not only she's dead. Oh, the dog is eating her. Oh, this is not good. So yeah, it was a good story. 4 out of 5 for that one. Good horror story. Then the next one we got up was Blockade Billy. Now, Blockade Billy was released as a novella in 2011. So it was already been out there. He just included it in here. And yes, this is my first time reading it. I avoided Blockade Billy for a long time because it was about baseball. And I don't like the baseball stories that King writes, but it wasn't just about baseball. There was some horror to it. There were some things to it. Blockade Billy, about a baseball player who isn't quite what he seems. It actually is a good book. You strip it. A lot of the baseball lingo, I just sort of, this went, woo, this is where it went. But as a story with the characters, it was really good. 4 out of 5 for Blockade Billy, and I am glad that I read it. You just kind of get if you're not into baseball, you don't really quite pick up the baseball jargon, that's fine. But it's still a good story. Next up, we got a story called Mr. Yummy. Yeah, Stephen King wrote a story called Mr. Yummy. Doesn't really, yeah. Mm-hmm. 2 elderly men see death avatars before they die. King is at that age. He's 67 years old. He's starting to write these stories about what happens to us after we die. He's starting to grapple with end-of-life stories, afterlife stories, death stories, old people stories. It's cropping up a lot in this collection. Mr. Yummy was okay. 3 out of 5. It didn't do it for me. It was decent. Good characters, but really, Mr. Yummy? Then, next up, we have the second poem in the collection. This is a poem called Tommy, and it's about the 1960s. I didn't rate it, again, because I don't rate poems. However, I did like Tommy more than I liked The Bone Church. Maybe because I could understand it a little bit better. Wasn't heavily entrenched in similes and metaphors and allusions, things like that. But I didn't give it a rating because, again, poetry. Next up, we got a horror story called The Great Green God of Agony. And there's another story where Stephen King starts to talk about his accident. It's very similar. The character of the story is very similar to what happened to Stephen King. Was in an accident, was in a lot of pain. And here he is grappling with the idea of pain and accidents and how the body deals with that. But it was a good horror story. And there really is a little green god of agony living in this person. A little green thing. So really, it wasn't a metaphor. It was something living inside him that was causing him pain. But I gave it a 4 out of 5 because I liked it. Next up, we got a story called That Bus is Another World. Man, this guy's got to start working out his titles. King, you're getting lazy. Some of the titles in this collection are weird. Okay, here literally is what it is. A man passing in a taxi sees a bus passing the other way and sees a woman get murdered. That's the story. It's a shell of a story. 2.5 out of 5. It is what it is. It didn't grab me. It was just one of those things where you go, interesting. Again, felt like a shell. Felt like a character sketch. Felt like a writing prompt. Felt like he's phoning it in. Next up, we've got another horror story called Obits. This is my second favorite one out of the whole collection. This one gets a 5 out of 5. I really liked Obits. It's about a man who realizes that he can write obituaries on living people and they'll die. And they'll die. And the ramifications of that. It's really good. Characters are good. The story is good. The horror is good. It's all good. He finds out that not only does the person die, but everybody with that same name dies. So we're talking about could be global catastrophes. I'm waiting for somebody to pick this up. I'm telling you right now, I'm waiting for somebody to pick this up and turn this into a movie. You wait for it. Obits is going to be a movie. Maybe it'll be a full-length movie. Maybe it'll be something like in a Creepshow compilation movie. Maybe it'll be a made-for-TV movie. I don't know. But someone's going to pick up Obits. And I'm going to wait for that, and I'm going to watch it because that was my second favorite one out of this collection. 5 out of 5. Then we got a story called Drunken Fireworks. This is a Castle Rock story. This is set in Castle Rock, and we get to see Castle Rock again. And it's basically about a poor family and a rich family, and they get into this fireworks arms race where they're trying to outdo each other. And at the end, it turns a little bad. A house burns down. 2 houses burn down, actually. And things happen. But it's a good story. I mean, the characters are just so great. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 as well. It's good to see Castle Rock again in some shape or form. I love Castle Rock. Before there was Derry, there was Castle Rock. And we grew up with Castle Rock. If you grew up reading King books, you grew up with Castle Rock way before Derry. Castle Rock is really King's, first real town. Great story. I loved it. And then finally, we finish off the entire collection with a story called Summer Thunder. And this is an end of the world story. This is a post-apocalyptic story. This is a story about what the nuclear bombs have gone off, radiation flooding the planet. Everybody is dying. And we got 2 old neighbors, 2 old men who are neighbors and a dog, and they're slowly dying from radiation poisoning. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Man, it's a bummer of a way to end the book, because it's just such a downer. Because everybody's dying, and they're dying violent deaths because they're dying from radiation poisoning. Just a bummer of a way, it's ending the book on a apocalyptic note. It's just the end. And it got me a little bit right here, right in the feels, just a little bit. And it was good. It was good. 4 out of 5 for that one. So overall, I would give the entire collection a 3 out of 5. Middle of the road-ish kind of rating. There were some really good gems in here. There was there was Obits, there was Drunken Fireworks. Some really good stories in here. There were some real stinkers. Real stinkers that I just didn't get. Premium Harmony, a death. Herman Wouk is still alive. And you may disagree with it. You may find that these are dark comedies that you get. And that's okay. I just didn't get them. A lot of stinkers in here. A lot of stories that I thought were shells. Could have been better. Could have been expanded on. Could have been longer. This is not his best compilation. That might be Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew might be his best compilation. So it's not his best compilation out of the 5 or 6 compilations that he's done. But it's not really his worst compilation. Still, as Stephen King, he still writes like a mofo. He still creates great characters. He still creates great dialogue. He still makes you laugh. He still makes you cry. He still has the ability to pull some tricks out of his sleeve. It's still well worth your time. Even the twosies that I gave, the ones that are 2 out of 5, they're still worth your time. Pick it up in paperback. I don't know if you want to spend the money on popping for this as a hardcover. Maybe wait for the paperback version. Be a little bit cheaper. Unless you're one of those purists that like to buy first edition hardcovers, and then by all means, pick it up. Love the artwork on here, though. The artwork on the cover of this, and of course, paperback version, we are guaranteed to get different artwork. So, there is that. But overall, here we are, Stephen King, and now that he's at a certain age, now his art has shifted, and he's starting to explore end of life and growing old stories and end of life stories, what happens when we die stories. And a lot of his characters now are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And his work is maturing and aging just as much as he is, at the same rate that he is. So we're getting a different type of collection than we got from Stephen King when he was in his 30s. The prime Stephen King was a different collection of stories than the mature, aging Stephen King. So, that being said, obviously he's at a different point in his life and he's writing different stories. But he can still do it. He can still write the characters, do the characterization, still do the dialogue. Still worth your time to pick it up. 3 out of 5 for the Bazaar of Bad Dreams. Maybe it's just the Bazaar of nappy time, sleepy time tea. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. But there's my review of Stephen King's latest short story collection. If you like the review, thumbs it up. If you don't like it, thumbs it down, but still thumbs it up. Share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, share it with the entire World Wide Web. And as always, keep reading, and I will see you at the next review.